On. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of On Oshkosh. I'm your host, Cheryl Hentz. Very pleased to welcome to the show this evening the Democratic candidate for the 18th State Senate District here in the state of Wisconsin. Kristin Alfheim is here, and welcome. We're very pleased to have you. It's a little confusing because this district has been represented by Republican Dan Fine since 2016, I believe. And when the district maps were redrawn, now he's in, I wrote this down, he somehow landed in District 20, where he's going to be seeking election or re-election, however you want to look at it there.
Right.
And but he's, as of this moment, he is still our state senator. And he will be so until January 7th. So it's kind of a new district in some ways that's been
definitely
drawn.
a new district. Yeah.
What does it all entail? I mean, you live in Appleton.
I do.
And this is in Oshkosh. And so where does it start and where does it go?
Yeah, it's really the bulk of Appleton, Menasha, Neenah, and Oshkosh. All of the city centers, the municipalities themselves are all really the hub. It's a very tight crescent around Lake Winnebago. And it is a very different district than it's been. It had been Neenah, Menasha, and Appleton were in 19, and then it pushed out to the west. And then you had 18 down here that was Oshkosh, and then down to the west and to the south. So it is very different. It's a very different makeup of people. It's actually, in my opinion, fantastic to finally have the four municipalities, the four school districts, all really being able to share a voice. Yeah, it's a very big deal.
Well, that's a good point. I was going to ask if having it change so dramatically as it has, if that has presented any issues for you when you've been out knocking on doors.
No, not issues. I think if probably the opposite. It's really opportunities because there are so many things that overlap. If I'm up in Appleton on the city council and I have a conversation about what another community is doing, let's say for the police department, the reference point is almost always Oshkosh because the communities are very similar. There's a lot of overlap. So when you look at it, if we as a state in the state issues, if we can have Appleton and Neenah, Menasha, and Oshkosh all working together to unify our conversation, whether it be school conversations or tourism or employee issues, it's a big deal that we can function as one body now, where before we were kind of broken up and then we had a lot of rural communities, and there's a difference between rural communities and these municipalities that have much bigger service areas to deal with.
Sure. My concern is that not just for state senate districts, but for the House of Representatives, we've had Paul Mary here for a number of years. I know of her for a number of years because she's been on the city council for so many years. But, she's still our state representative, but there are people who I think are going to be confused as to, okay, where am I? Who's my person to go to?
Yeah,
so
it will happen. There's plenty of sites out there. League of Women Voters has a great, right on their main page, they have a breakdown of the maps. Penny Bernard-Shaber actually had a presentation, and that's great. There are people that got cut out that are in different areas. So you have Kyle Kehoe, that's now an assembly for the Democrats down there. There's a lot of different things, but again, the heart of Oshkosh and the other three communities are really all in the 18th now.
Yeah. And Lori, of course, Lori Palmieri is seeking another term as our state
Lori's
representative we're still the 54th Assembly District.
Yes.
So that's what she's seeking re-election for. So in all, there are 99 state assembly seats and 16 state senate seats on the ballot in November. Very important election. They're all important, but there's so much riding on this one. So if you are not yet registered to vote, please contact your town clerk, your city clerk, whoever your clerk is who can help get you registered to vote. Please do so. And if you are already registered, know that you can vote early if you choose to. You may also vote absentee if you want to go that route. Or you can do what a lot of people do and go to the polls on Tuesday, November 5th. So before we get into the bulk of issues and so forth, why don't you tell us, Kristin, a little bit about yourself and why you're doing this?
Sure. So I'm a Wisconsin girl, born and raised in central Wisconsin, Schofield, just outside of Wausau. I was raised on a small beef farm. My dad worked full-time at the paper mill. I mean, we moved out through it. I was probably 3.5. My sister, I think, was 5. And growing up on a farm really does create you as a person. I really believe that. From the time we were little, we were allowed to roam and explore 300 acres. The rule was as long as we could see the barn or the house and we could hear Mom if she yelled. And she had a good set of lungs on her. But we could go anywhere. We could do anything. And that freedom to just go and explore just creates a brave being about yourself. And undoubtedly, when you're given that much leash, things will go wrong. And we would get ourselves into trouble. We might, whether we got older, it might be stalling out a vehicle, or it might be doing this or getting hurt. But we had to figure ourselves out of the problem that we got ourselves into. They just create this self-reliance. And then as you get older, then the work comes with the farm. And I mean, these are the real stories. You're 7 years old and you're on a full-size tractor doing the work, because that's what you did. You learned that work came before play, but there was an awful lot of play. I enjoyed being on the farm. Went from there. Politically, I was raised, my dad was a union paper mill guy. My mom was a pro-life Catholic. So in my house, it was normal to have 2 different opinions, and we were told why they voted the way they did, but that was the end of the conversation. There was never any angst, there was never anything else about it. Life moves on. I ended up in the restaurant industry for a number of years.
Oh, wow.
Got married young and had a little one, inherited a stepchild right away, so all of a sudden life is very different. And I enjoyed doing that. And one day my daughter got sick, and she was in the hospital for about 9 days. And I realized I spent more time reading books to her and spending time in those 9 days in the hospital than I probably had in the last 3 years. And so I started looking for a different opportunity, because the restaurant industry is not easy on house life. So I ended up getting into the insurance and financial world, and within a very short amount of time they all realized that I was pretty good at asking questions. I wasn't in it I didn't understand the sales part of it. I didn't understand all the answers, but I was very good at knowing that I was there to make it feel better. So if I could ask questions and figure out what hurt, then I would go find what would make it better. And that's very much my philosophy. And I had great success in that business. Moved from the Wausau area, eventually out to the Green Bay area, had an agency out there, and was there until about 2016. I moved down into the Appleton area. Now I'm kind of semi-retired. I only work with people on kind of a referral-only basis. But while I was doing that, in that industry, I started doing advocacy voluntarily in Madison and Washington, D.C. for 2 different groups. One was the Alzheimer's Association. So you're basically asking people to, help more research dollars and funds to help the caregivers. And the other one was NAFA, which is Main Street Normal Your and My Taxes and Retirement.
And what's the name of that one?
NAFA, National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors.
Okay.
So those 2 groups, voluntarily, I would go to Madison and D.C. And sometimes when I was in D.C., I was there on back-to-back weeks. And it astounded me that I would get on the bus with one group. Let's say it was the Alzheimer's group. I would get on the bus, we'd be going from the hotel to the Capitol, and the bus would be full of blue people. And immediately they would be angry, and they would assume that nothing good would happen from our congressional meetings with any Republicans. And I thought that was odd, because in the end, don't we all want to cure Alzheimer's? Then I would get on the next bus, literally 3 days later, and it was full of reds. And they would just be screaming about Tammy Baldwin and how she would never be helping them on anything tax and financial. I'm like, well, isn't that dumb? I mean, you're going into that. So I literally started helping both groups realize that depending on who you're talking to, your conversation has to change. Tammy Baldwin loves her people. She loves the people of Wisconsin. It doesn't matter if you're in manufacturing, it doesn't matter if you're in agriculture, it doesn't matter if you are living, it doesn't matter. If you're in her area, you're her people. So we started shifting the conversation. What bill, what tax rule, how would it affect the people that live on Main Street in Oshkosh? And once we could do that, then Tammy would say, oh, and she would actually go to help us solve that problem. The Alzheimer's bus was different also. Ron Johnson isn't a touchy-feely guy. He is, and these are his words, cantankerous bean counter. Those were the words that he would use, and this was back in the day, so that's just what he was. But he's not going to be a heartstring guy. So that group, we had to talk fiscal. We had to talk about how much are we investing to solve it, how much are we spending now on Medicare and Medicaid. Oh, and by the way, it's going to cost more than the defense budget by 2038 if we don't do something. And all of a sudden, Ron Johnson is not standing in the way. When the NIH said we needed to, he always approved. So the point is, there is always a purple in every conversation. Are we willing to look for it, and are we trusting enough that we will look at both sides and help us find that answer together? So I like that. I'm good at that. So when COVID hit, everything got shut down.
Yeah.
So I was kind of missing the political bug, and my neighbor, the alder person, was going to step down after 9 years. And I asked her, "You think I would be good at that?" And she said yes, with a few more colorful words. And so I had never claimed a party. I had always been realistically an independent, more of a swing voter. And I went down to City Hall, found out what I had to do, got my papers, got my signatures, and I bought 25 signs. And the sign it was a circle. And on the outside of one circle, the circle was blue, and on the other side it was red, and in the middle it was purple, and it had my name. And underneath it, it said rational thought. And I planted those 25 signs in strategic places, and I ended up winning.
And this was for alderperson in the city of Appleton?
In Appleton,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
So what I learned immediately in getting on city council is how little I knew. And I think that's something that I like to share with people. We think we know. I mean, I was involved in Madison and DC, and I had no idea how municipal government worked. So the amount of knowledge that I've gained in that last year, understanding how difficult it is to provide the resources that we must provide as a community while managing our budgets that are so razor thin, in many cases 40% behind where we were due to lack of revenue sharing. It is so hard. And I think that was probably the best thing I could have done in truly understanding how government works and how hard the staff works to do exactly what they're supposed to within those very tough parameters.
Sure.
And that just kind of led us up the hill. Ended up in 2022, started realizing the challenges that went on with gerrymandering. To be honest, a very complacent, comfortable person doesn't realize that there are things that in Wisconsin that have been affected tremendously negatively, and gerrymandering has to do with that. So I started getting involved in that point, ended up running for state senate in 2022 for District 19, and we put on a great show. We lost by about 6,000 votes, and that should have been approximately, it should have been about a $750,000 campaign, both sides, front money, back money, all the money. And we raised and spent about $700,000, and our opponent spent $2.1 million. It's ridiculous, the amount of money that goes on.
Yeah.
And if I had a magic wand, it would be to get rid of all the money in politics, all of it, all of it.
So that would be your campaign finance reform?
I would
Get rid of
love,
it.
yeah, and that has to be on a national level. Realistically,
yeah.
in Wisconsin, we can't do anything, but it is a big deal because, again, this is a great example of you're going to ask me questions, you're looking me in the eye, and I have to answer you, and I don't know what you're going to ask. That is how you should be as candidates. That's how we should be exposing ourselves, without prep, without talking points. And when you can spend an enormous amount of money to buy a persona and have that blasted on TV all day long in the radio, you're selling a package that may not be full. And I don't like that. I think we should have to earn it. I think the eye contact matters. Asking the same question, hearing the responses and the consistency in a message really validates who you are. And that should be done in these formats, in forums, in debates, in interviews. Commercials can happen, that's fine, but that shouldn't be the basis of learning who a candidate is.
Well, frankly, and I know you've heard it, we've all heard it, and we're all sick of it, I think.
Yeah.
We're tired of the crap coming in the mail. We're tired of every single commercial break, you're inundated with these ads. And
You should try it when you're the one on the ad.
yeah, and there's really very little truth, I think, to some of the ads. You talk about campaign finance reform. I would like to see us have, some kind of election reform where there's a type of truth in advertising.
I would love that.
These half truths.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's not done by the candidates. These political action committees are out there putting forth a lot of these ads, and as the candidate, you or whoever the candidate is doesn't have control over those things,
Right.
and yet it reflects poorly on you when it comes out and it's filled with lies. I remember one, it was when Governor Walker was still in office, and I can't remember if it was during his recall campaign or a different campaign, but the ad said that Scott Walker was the only governor in the history of our state to balance the budget. And I'm literally screaming at the TV saying that's a lie, that's an outright lie. Our state constitution says we must have a balanced biennium budget. Right. It's there in the Constitution. So, but see, people don't know that.
No.
And had it not been for doing this show, I probably would not have known that either.
Right.
But it's those kinds of things. They shouldn't be allowed. That's an outright lie.
Right.
And it shouldn't be allowed to happen. And I think that's one of the reasons people are so fed up with all these ads.
Well, part of the challenge is, again, a statement will be made. And you could use this in my race, you could use it in Hovde, you could use it just about anywhere. When statements are made behind closed doors, and they make a very clear statement as to how they stand on an issue, and then from there forward they backpedal, well, then you end up getting ads ads come in and they claim that they're lies. Well, no. This is what you say. Backpedaling after that, it still is the message. I've got one they're running on me right now, and it's I giggle. I giggle because they're so mad about it. They've got a great picture of me. It's one of my favorite pictures, and they've ruined it. But it's this. They took this picture and they're talking about that I gave myself I don't know what it was, a 10% increase in my salary when I was on the council. I mean, it was the biggest increase in 20 years. Okay, first, you can't vote in the city council on your own salary. It is always for future elections, so it can't do that. Second, it was indeed an 8-ish% increase. The grand total came to $10 a week. $10. That's the real story. And that's the increase for a 3-year period, the last time they got it. It's like, come on now.
Yeah.
And that is literally being practically billboarded across the state. No, come on.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to do.
Yeah. I should state for the record here that Kristin's opponent, Dr. Anthony Phillips, he's the Republican challenger. He was invited to appear on this program. His people declined, and so we're going to still have the conversation without him. It's just that simple. You don't want to be here, then that's fine. We'll still talk. So what makes you stand out from Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple things. One, I have practiced my entire life in problem solving from different viewpoints. And then you add that in, the communication skills and the skills necessary to do that as a basis. Now you add in the fact that I have been working through the state issues, the federal issues, and the local issues. So the base of knowledge that I have and what is necessary to actually get things done. In Madison, I have worked on bills that have been passed. I have governor pens in my portfolios. I've helped for 10 years. I helped to pass or helped to work, and we finally got passed mandatory financial literacy in high schools in Wisconsin. You wouldn't think it would take that much effort to go, but there's always a lot going on. How is it funded? Is it an unfunded mandate? Who wants it? How many credits? That is an issue that, in my opinion, is purple. We all want our kids to come out of school with the basics necessary to find success.
We should anyway.
Right? That was a bill that was actually authored by a Republican senator. It didn't matter because it was the right answer, and my job was very successfully in working with both sides to make that happen. You can do that, and you have to have the right personality, you have to have the right communication skills, and you have to have earned the respect of the people that you're going there to talk to as a rational, pragmatic person. And when you show up quarterly and you sit with your congressman, you sit with your senator, you sit with your state legislatures, you create a relationship that, again, half of them are red, half of them are blue, and you show up and you have the conversation anyway. So people in Madison know me as someone who wants to know all of the facts and then wants to talk about all of the options that we have to move forward together. And almost everything will rely on compromise. Okay. Almost everything. Just like in business, it doesn't matter what it is. If everybody leaves a conversation mildly irritated, but no one has been kicked in the teeth, it probably was the right answer. Because neither side can always be right. I know that, and I have a track record of that. So to me, the biggest difference is one, truly being a purple mindset person, and the experience in all levels of government to know that I don't know everything. But I know a lot, and I'm humble enough to say that more will come in, and that information will come from all sides, from everyone, and then do the best we can to be pragmatic about every situation we're in.
You've said in other interviews that people expect action from people in Madison, and I think that's right. And yet, so often action doesn't happen, simply because no one wants to cross the aisle. I've actually known people who have tried to get certain pieces of legislation passed for their particular causes, and they have been told, don't even bother trying right now because it's being brought forth by a Democrat and there's not a single Republican who's going to support it. And that was these people were crestfallen to hear something like that.
Right.
And who wouldn't be when you work so hard and you're so passionate about certain issues and you know that something needs to change to further your cause, not just your cause, but a cause for the greater good. And yet you can't get it to move off dead center because someone's not a Democrat, someone's not a Republican. And it cuts both ways. Both sides are guilty of this. So how do we get action? You've sort of alluded to this, but how do we take action? How do we make steps forward in order to get people to reach across the aisle and be willing to work with each other? You've touched on it, but can you give us, elaborate on that a little bit more, if you would, please,
Right.
Kristin?
So part of it is not an individual thing. Part of it is the lines. There is a reality, if you think about the last 10 plus years. If the state of Wisconsin is very much a 50-50 state. We all know this to be true.
Never mind, just...
It's 50-50. And if the maps are all of a sudden drawn to the equivalent of a supermajority, that means that the party with the supermajority doesn't care. They don't need any help from the other side to get what they want. They also don't need to waste their time in listening to bills or having hearings on issues that they have no interest in passing. If you look at the numbers in the last two sessions, I believe the answer is 97% of the bills that got as far as having a hearing came from the Republican side. They only allowed 3%. Do you know how many bills were drafted by the Democrats last?
Oh, I'm sure dozens,
right?
If not more so.
Only 3% of any of the public hearings came from bills that came from that side. Because
because it's
Right.
Republican controlled.
Right. Now, this is not meant to say, the point is the structure won't allow it to work. You could argue the same thing could have been true. If the supermajority is on the side of the blue, the same thing would happen.
Yeah.
I love the fact, truly love the fact that our maps have been brought back to the center. Because if we would have gone from a gerrymander red to a gerrymander blue, we would just be repeating that history. We'd be undoing and then pushing, and that just has a revolt. So having fair maps, to me, tells us that from a structure standpoint, nothing can happen without effort from both sides. It's physically impossible to pass anything without crossing the lines. So that structure creates the accountability for the state of Wisconsin. Now, there's a second level of that. So then the question is, if both parties are going to have to be involved, then will the leadership of the party allow people to use their own thoughts? That's the question. And there's a definite track record on the Republican side that would be in question.
Sure.
And if you're not following the line, then you get primaried out. So the question will be, and in my opinion, again, as the outsider coming in, the table is set for cross work to happen. The table is set. Now it's the leadership's responsibility to actually lead. Lead by saying, what is the information, where should we be, and help find that purple answer. Now is we're going to start judging the performance of our people to say, are you leading them to solutions or are you leading them to defense? I am very, very, very confident that the Democrats are going to lead through action. I truly believe that. And if it doesn't happen naturally, then I'll be the one driving it from the center. And they all know that. And they're excited for me to be there because I do have an open mind on things. I do understand things from multiple perspectives. And that's where we want to be. That is where the people want us to be right now. Let's just start getting things done. We have to start dealing with the issues.
Okay, I love that. I had down here about talking about the new maps, but we've kind of covered that. Are there, if you're elected, are there specific committees that you would like to serve on?
I don't think I'll have an option. I honestly think that committees are assigned.
Yeah, they are.
I poke them a little bit just because I'd like to have an idea. And it looks like they're going to lean me towards financial service companies, so banks, credit unions, insurance companies, that stuff.
Because of your professional background. Yeah.
Perhaps healthcare, because I've got some experience there as well. So I'll serve wherever they want me to serve. I don't.
Would there be committees if you had your druthers that you would be more passionate about?
I would do just about anything to make sure that every kid in Wisconsin had a great opportunity to be in Wisconsin. I mean, just kids. And there isn't a committee for children. You could look at education, you could look at housing, you could look at healthcare, you could look at so many different things. I really, really, really believe that we have lost focus in Wisconsin on how imperative it is that every child is fed, housed, healthy, and educated.
Well, the kids are falling behind. And,
They are.
I'm not a parent. I don't know what the answers are either. But I think that one of the answers has to be we've got to get, I don't want to sound like I want to go back to the 50s, but things were different in the 50s. We have to have these kids having respect for their teachers, for the school administration, for other people in general.
Yeah.
And I think if you have some kind of respect and decorum in the classroom, you might learn a little bit more.
Yeah.
You can't learn when everybody else is doing their own thing. And then I hear about furries being in classrooms, and that's another whole thing. I don't even want to get into that, but I've heard about this, which is distracting from the other kids learning. It's just sort of silly. But now we are, if you're elected, there's going to be, I believe at that point, about a $3 billion, billion with a B, folks, surplus in our budget.
Yeah.
How much of that would you want to see going toward K through 12 education? And then we can talk about secondary higher education later, but how much would you want to go toward public education?
Yeah, I'm not going to say that I know a number. What I would say is, first, when you talk about the excess, people will often say it's one-time money, and I would challenge that.
Oh, we've had it for a while.
Yeah, it's not one-time money because a lot of the increase is that things are more expensive. And if something costs $150 today, you're still paying the tax on the $150. So that number is going to go up, and we know prices aren't coming down. Secondly, that surplus exists. Much of that surplus exists because of the money that we are no longer and have not been sending to K through 12 and the municipalities. There is no question. The stats are very, very clear. Every K through 12, every municipality, their budgets are, their funding from the state are behind by no less than 35 to 42% from where they were just over a decade ago. Now, I don't know about you. You can talk about declining attendance at school, but there is nothing that you can do from a budget standpoint to cut to try and make up the difference. If your attendance is only down by, let's say we're down by 10%, okay. You can't get rid of a tenth of a teacher. You can't adjust that way. I think everybody thinks there should just be an easy eraser. Yeah. You have fewer kids, therefore, make it better. It doesn't work that way. Right. You have to, it is in our Constitution to educate our children. And to do that, in today's age, it is different. There are 16 different languages spoken in the Appleton School District. I believe the answer is 26 languages are spoken in the Oshkosh School District.
Wow.
In the Appleton and Oshkosh, and I think Menasha is close, 40, if not more, 40% of the students that attend K through 12 in 3 out of the 4 municipality school districts are receiving free meals, which means that's an income of $36,500 or less for a family of 4.
Yeah.
That's the reality. That's the reality. So we want to be able to say if everything were perfect at home, then they would come to school, and that's great. But we can't make that happen.
Right.
There is no magic wand to make it easier for families at home that are struggling that are working 3 jobs, that are struggling with daycare, they're struggling to put nutritious food on their table. We can't, number one, assume that all of those families are just bad. We have to realize that they are struggling. Right. And if they're struggling, then what are we going to do? Just say, we don't care? Or are we going to become, what's the point? The point is to make sure the child has the opportunity to find success in our community. If you don't want things to repeat, you have to educate them out, which means our schools must pick up the slack. That becomes more expensive. Now, in the last 10 years, costs have gone up. Their wages haven't necessarily at that level. So it's getting harder and harder for them to do it at home, which means the pressure on the schools, on the teachers, on the resources is harder than ever.
Right.
And we have less money than we've ever had. So we have to have an honest conversation about what education means to our community. It is not just education. It is culturing our community and our future leaders. Should we or should we not put that on the highest level possible?
Well, let me ask you this, and I don't know if you know the answer, but I mean, you're a smart woman and you've been around Madison for a while, so maybe you do know the answer to this. You know, you said a lot of the surplus, this $3 billion surplus, has come from not funding things that they should have been funding. When we all know, and I think we all pretty much agree, that today's kids are what tomorrow's society will be.
Right.
You know, so if we all understand that, and we pretty much all agree that education is important, why in the world would the state not want to fund the education if that's what it's supposed to be doing? I mean, that to me, that defies logic.
It defies logic. I don't care what the issue is. And this is, you know, there are plenty of talking points that come from the right about reducing the people that are utilizing state, you know, social service programs, about reducing crime, all of these things. You know the best way to do that? Educate people. Educate children. Give them an opportunity to find success in our community.
Yes.
If we just, you're going to spend the money. It is a fiscal situation to say, where should we invest in our community? And the answer is as soon as possible with our youth. You could even argue younger than K through 12. The faster we can help kids ensure they have the best shot at success in life, the better off we are as a community. The better off the business community is down the line, because people want to stay here and work because our workforce is high.
So
everything is better.
Done? I mean, it sounds to me like we need to be educating some people in Madison.
Well,
I mean,
I think that, again, what I don't like is when problems are created due to a lack of funding, and then when people point at there being lack of results. That's what's been going on for well over a decade. When you stop funding something and you literally start to cut, and the need is going higher, that the math in terms of how we take care of our schools must be fixed. The math that deals with voucher programs must be fixed. If we agree, if we can share the vision that it is our responsibility, is an opportunity and an obligation to ensure every child has what they need in school to be successful, then we must realize the math has got to change. And part of that shared vision is understanding that whatever we do with these children is our future. That is our future. All you have to do is look at that starting point and look 15 years later, and you will have a very good picture of what the outlook is. We can control that. If we want a better outlook, then we invest at the baseline. It is the foundation of who we are, and we have to start operating that.
And I am so tired of people complaining about, you know, and pointing the finger at COVID, saying, our kids are so far behind because they lost that year, they lost that year. We were losing these kids before COVID happened.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert in that. I do know that I hear plenty of people that share that. I've talked to teachers, I've talked to parents. There's a lot of things that have changed. I have been raising teenagers for 30 years. For 30 years, I have had teenagers in my house. And I will tell you that there is a humongous difference. My oldest is now 40, and she didn't have a cell phone until maybe her, I mean, maybe her senior year, and it was just texting. Just texting. The second one, who is now 31, she had a cell phone and it was texting, and then it went into the iPads. But it was at the edge when she was in high school. They weren't really omnipresent in school. Then I have 2 stepchildren. One of them is 21, one of them is 18. The whole world now revolves around a Chromebook. The whole world revolves around an iPad and a phone. And it is different. It is very different. It's almost, and again, this is not, I'm not an expert in this. What I do know is that there's a copy and paste version of school now that I don't think existed before. And I just know that it's a reality. And you can't just take it away. There's no such thing as saying, okay, well, social media just has to go to the side. It doesn't work that way. So there's challenges in society, then there are challenges in a schoolroom. But we all agree that kids should be able to come out of K through 12 reading, writing, rational, solutions-based thinking, and maybe some basic skills that will allow them to know how to make something beyond mac and cheese. I mean, I don't know about you, but I had home ec and I had shop class, right?
Well, you're lucky. I didn't have shop class.
I had shop
but
class.
I had home ec.
I had both.
Part of it was
Right.
a good experience. Part of it
I'm
was
just saying
not.
I can sew on my own button today because there was part of it. So again, I think most of us crave the idea of give our kids what they need to find success. We can disagree on how exactly that is, but can we just start having conversations about it together and put the money where it is necessary? And I think that the number one priority must be strengthen our schools for the sake of our future, which means our kids.
What do you think is, I'm not going to say what is our top priority that needs to be fixed in this state, because that would be unfair. You can't possibly come up with just one. But what would you say, as you're knocking on doors, what would you say the people are telling you is, is or are their top priority or priorities?
I will say in my conversations, when I hit a door, I just tell them who I am, what I'm representing, and then I ask them. I try not to be telling them much. I listen. So what do you want to tell me? What do you want to ask me? I'm here to listen. I don't care who you vote for. And oftentimes the answer is just stop the noise. Just stop the nonsense. Stop the games that are going on, and can you just get back to doing stuff? Most people are not deep, deep red or deep, deep blue. Most people are somewhere in the middle, and they realize that they can't necessarily have everything they want, but there is some expectation of forward progress. I think that's the number one thing that I hear. And part of that might be the way that I ask the question. Then after that, I do hear about women's issues. I think there is a loud conversation out there that people, I mean, again, it was at the federal level, then they're all excited because they push it to the state level. Look at our state. Is our state properly representing all the people of Wisconsin? No. So instead of letting the people of a state decide, I think we ought to let the person decide. I just do. We don't have to like it to understand that someone should have those rights. It's a very personal decision between them and their doctor, nobody else. I believe that, and I hear a lot of that. In terms of costs, I think everybody can agree that childcare is out of control. We don't have enough providers, and the cost is ridiculous. Do you know how much it costs? I don't think people realize. I often hear people, well, when I was this, when I was that. Yeah, I know. When I was a kid, I got paid 50 cents an hour to babysit. I get it.
But we didn't have as much money then either. So it's all relative.
It's all relative. And today, I mean, again, I babysat full time for a living. I got paid $50 for a week for 6 kids. That isn't reality. It now literally costs over $1,000 a month for one kid. Now, what kind of, you literally have to make probably $80,000 a year before you're making enough money that you can actually pay your rent, which the average rent in the Fox Valley is north of $1,200.
Yeah.
Childcare, $1,200. That's $2,400. Now you got to put food and groceries on the table. You literally have to make $50,000 a year to net out enough to make a basic living. That is reality. Now, there's a lot of conversations about taxes, about inflation. The reality is, what can we do on the baseline costs? So I would rather us deal with childcare, deal with healthcare, deal with housing, because those are fixed costs that we can immediately drop down. I would rather deal with the fact of the revenue sharing coming back to the schools and Madison, so our property taxes might come back down, property taxes are up because the municipalities and the schools don't have any money. So
right.
we can literally, every household could have a better situation, and they would be better off than a minuscule tax break that's being promised that is going to do the normal person. It might be an average of a $500 a year thing. To the billionaires at the top of the ticket, that's millions and millions of dollars that they're going to save. Corporations, millions and millions of dollars. We can do things at the household kitchen table level that reduces costs. We can do that. We just have to realize why. Is childcare a household issue? Why should someone over here care about it? It is a fiscal issue. I work in the retirement world. Do you know how many 60-year-old women retire early out of their profession so that they become the full-time daycare of their grandchildren?
Yeah.
So you talk about an economic crisis. We have educated, skilled, experienced people that are coming out of the workforce for daycare. We have people that are on the young side trying to get up, and they can't have the second spouse leave the house because they can't afford it. It is an economic situation.
Right. I want to talk about shared revenue for a moment because, this is something that's been sticking in my craw for a number of years, and I know the state in recent years has, given little dribs and drabs more back to the communities.
Crumbs.
But crumbs. There you go. But it's not happening fast enough, and yet they have no problem shoving unfunded mandates down our necks. Now, one that just popped up here in recent weeks. You live in Appleton, so I understand that you may not be aware of this, but here in the city of Oshkosh, like everywhere, our properties were all recently revalued. I think a lot of people were shocked who own homes when they got their revaluation statements. And then all of a sudden now we find out and those revaluations for residences were done by city employees. There was a company hired to do the commercial properties because the state didn't seem to like the numbers that it saw. It's now demanding that those commercial properties be revalued, and along with that, all the personal residences have to be revalued as well. And we have to pay for that company or a company to come out and redo all the commercial properties at close to about $300,000. Now, we already laid out well over $100,000 and some the first time. So here's another, I call that an unfunded mandate. Madison is requiring it, and yet they won't budge on coming up with one single penny of it. Well, where the hell are we supposed to come up with the money?
Yeah.
That's the thing I'm sick and tired of. Madison takes, but it doesn't want to give back.
Yeah. There is an issue, right? I think that in these municipalities, and again, Appleton, Neenah, Menasha, Oshkosh, there is absolutely, and I've talked to all of the mayors, I understand all of these communities need to be taken care of. Their number one job, their only job is to take care of their citizens. Now, I do understand reevaluations. Appleton went through it last year, and I was on the board of review. So we didn't have the same situation. We did, in understanding a reevaluation doesn't change the mill rate. Right? So realistically, it's a rebalancing of where everything is. So this is where the last one, the state requires us, every municipality, to be within 10% of overall market value. So as soon as we fall low, it forces us to have to do one, whether we want to or not. We could have done one 18 months ago, and if there was a change drastic enough, we'd have to do it again. So the state mandates that. So then when they do a revaluation, theoretically, some houses are getting older and their value is coming down, some areas become more whatever, but in the end, it's the same tax levy, just redistributed to make it fair. That to me makes sense. Mm-hmm. So in Appleton, I think the answer was 39% was the average. Now, sticker shock, you think that's crazy, but realistically, that didn't change anything in people's taxes. It just changed it. But I was on the board of review, and we had commercial property owner come in, and he made a very strong case on why his valuation was wrong, because after all, after COVID, his rental was down. The space wasn't being used. And we had to have a very serious conversation about it may be down right now, but you just said you've got it booked coming in, which means your revenue's coming back up. So in essence, we did not give on that. We said no. Your value has changed the way the rest of them have. What's going on in Oshkosh, I have to look into more detail on it, but to me, that sounds like Big Brother got involved in saying help out our commercial space. Well, don't do it at the cost of the community.
Yeah.
That's the issue. We can take care of each other, commercial, business, community. We can work together on it, but don't play favorites.
Yeah.
Don't do the reevaluation and make it work and then say, oh, no, we don't like this. Because if they bring those evaluations down on the commercial, that means all of those residentials are going to come up.
Right.
That's not going to fly.
Yeah.
Not going to fly.
Let's talk about affordable housing for a moment or two, because, and you and I both know affordable is a word that, to me, it may mean one thing, to you it may mean something else. To the guy down the street, it may mean something completely different as well. But clearly, there are an awful lot of people who can't afford housing.
Yeah.
And they are people who are making between $50,000 and, say, $70,000, $75,000 a year or less, and they can't afford rent, but they also can't afford to purchase a home. And where are they to go? I have recently heard of a community where when a company came in, a developer came in to build a multi-family project, they required a small percentage of those units to be designated strictly for people who had low to moderate or severely low income. And yes, they were getting TIF money for their project, but I would like to see, and there's got to be a way to do it. And someone said they think it's already in the state legislature to allow, or state legislature to allow this. But I would like to see, when any developer wants to develop a project, that they have to set aside a certain percentage of those units for people who need housing, who are in that low to really severely low area. Would you support something like that?
I support expanding affordable housing, period. I think that it's hard sometimes. So I'll give you an example of downtown Appleton. Downtown Appleton has had a humongous amount of increase in more of the high-end residentials right along the strip. And we have calls all the time. Why would we do that? First, who can afford that? Who's going to buy that? Whatever. Well, the answer is they're full. There are people buying that. The problem that a municipality has is that we can't necessarily make people do many things with their land.
Yeah.
We just can't. So if you have a developer come in and they want to take over a building and build it, and they want to do luxury apartments on top and retail on the bottom, as long as they're following all the codes and the zoning and everything else, we pretty much have to say that. Now, then we have to work as a community to find there are not that many affordable housing developers out there.
Right.
And the real answer is because there isn't any money in it. Developers tend to develop for profit. So when you talk about affordable housing, where you know there is a capped opportunity for income, it is very difficult to find a developer, a good developer, that will build what we need them to do, where we want it to do. We have the TIF, we can utilize the TIF, which is not a negative in any way. It's usually as a pay-go TIF.
Right.
So they're taking land that has zero value, increasing it, and they get the break until it's paid off. But you have to find space. And I think one of the biggest things that we've tried to do in Appleton is realize that building space for where this affordable housing should be has to be in the comprehensive plan. We can't just keep building one thing and then realizing we don't have any place for anybody to live. Right. So understand that there's beautiful reason that we should have lake, and riverside luxury apartments. People want them. And that usually creates a vacuum, so people are coming out of one house to move into that. And that does help the market. The challenge that we have, a lot of it has to do with inventory. We just don't have enough. The reality is we had for more, interest rate wise, right? You and I are old enough to know that a mortgage in the real world should have been somewhere in the 4 to 6% range for most people for most of the time, right? We all know there were higher numbers than that. When interest rates are running at 1.8 and 2.5 for over a decade, it was a buying frenzy. Buy. Now all of a sudden interests have to be adjusted. You can't run that low that long without having to ask it to slow down. The point of interest rates being higher is so that people slow down buying so inventory can catch up. in today's world, nobody slows down doing anything. They just do it and then are mad that it's more expensive.
Yeah.
That's the real story, right? So,
Yeah.
so every mechanism that the government and the economy has to try and slow down so that we can catch up on inventory, they're trying to do it. It's whether people want to heed that or not. But we have to be looking for more inventory. I'm a big believer in looking back to, again, rezoning so our communities can be built instead of these half-acre lots where the setback is so much. Bring us back to those 50s styles neighborhoods that we all love and enjoy, and give us those homes, those 2-bedroom, 1.5 baths, the affordable houses that families can get started in and that retirees can step out of their big family homes back into. There aren't enough of them.
Sure.
We have land, we have the want to, we have to have the zoning and the comprehensive plan that allows it, and then I do believe on a state level that there does need to be investment in it. Because to ask a developer to build a house that is only worth, you're going to purchase it at $150,000 as opposed to that same contractor or developer selling a $600,000 house, which one would they rather build? This one. Yeah. So there's going to have to be incentives from a state standpoint to help the developers and the builders give us what our community needs, and there will be some offset on there.
Sure.
We invest in almost every industry behind closed doors.
Sure.
It tends to not be childcare. It tends to not be builders because that's not the situation. But we have to start looking at things differently.
Sure. We're down to probably about 7 or 8 minutes, and I want to get a couple more things in here. As far as healthcare costs go, we know they are skyrocketing out of this world. What, in your opinion, can be done to bring down those costs?
Oh, that's a big question.
I know, with not a lot of time.
There's so much. There's multiple things you could talk about in the healthcare industry, but I will tell you that I think that understanding the whole problem is important. I think we get a bill from the hospital and it's $42,000 and we think we're being robbed. The reality is that most of the hospitals in our community, 40% of them are losing money because of the way the ratio is on the Medicare reimbursement, the private physicians over to the side that aren't taking the Medicaid patients. There's an imbalance in the reimbursement. We cannot afford, it's funny we have the same ringtone. I keep thinking it's mine. We cannot afford, again, opportunity and obligation. We must take care of everyone. It's what we say. But when you have a shift in the business, you have lots of clinics and they're all fighting over shares. You have the insurance industry that then has their favorites and they want you to go to certain places. You have third-party administrators in there that are taking their share. It has become ugly. But what we know is those funds are not landing in the pockets of the hospitals. And there are more funds coming out of our pockets than there ever has. So where is it going? Where are the profits? And can we work together? And again, this is Wisconsin. We have great insurance companies that live here and function here in Wisconsin. But we have got to be realistic about taking care of people and sharing that weight and not abusing people. We have to do that. And that comes from a balanced approach. Find what is real. Don't just point fingers because it is a big problem. And it will take a lot of work and a lot of give and take to find the solution. But in the end, you have to be able to keep yourself healthy.
Sure.
And if it's too expensive to go, that's going to be a problem. Period. So I don't have a magic wand on healthcare. I'm smart enough to know that it is a big problem. And it's not going to be fixed overnight, but we have to start being realistic about where are people being taken advantage of, and can we point that out and eliminate it? And can we ensure that we have all of the services we need when we need them? That is real. There are hospitals on the western side of the state that shut down. That could happen here. I've talked to the purveyors, I've talked to these clinics, and the reality is that it is not a single issue. We have to be realistic and make sure that we start looking at it in depth. In depth. I don't have a magic pill. I really don't.
Well, I think most of these problems that we've been talking about tonight, there's not one or two key answers.
There aren't.
It's a multitude of answers that we all have to bring to the table and we all have to work together. And I think that's the only way that these problems are going to get solved. You don't have a magic wand, as you said. The Republicans don't have magic wands. None of us has a magic wand. But if we, I appreciate some of your answers tonight, Kristin, because you've helped explain how we got to some of the points that we're at.
Right.
And I think it's important that people understand those answers, and if you can understand it, then maybe you can help come up with better answers and solutions. I mean, let's face it, we're a state of very smart people. We're not for lack of intelligence here, but it takes all of us working together, I think.
Yeah. I think that's going to be the answer with everything. There's the government, there's the people, and there's the private sector. And the answer can never come from just one. It's going to take all three legs of that stool in almost everything we do. Everybody is going to bear some weight in every solution we come up with. And then the key is to do it realistically, do it together. The people, the business, and the government must start working together to find a balance that we can all tolerate. Again, everybody's going to be mildly irritated, but no one is going to lose it. Not individuals, not the taxpayer, and not the corporations that are involved as well. We have to start working together.
Okay. Do you think voting has gotten, the voting laws and voter registration and showing ID at the polls, do you think all of that has gotten easier and made the whole election process easier in recent years, or has it created more frustration for people?
I think that we've been in an era of doubt has been put onto the system. It's interesting because if you go talk to your clerks and you pull the actual data, the data is available to anyone. We have so little nonsense in Wisconsin, it's crazy. The amount, you can go look. I think there were 6 people that were convicted of illegally voting, and in whichever election it was, I can't remember. And
I think it was a couple elections
right,
ago.
it was a couple back. The point is, it is a 0.00. It is such a negligible number. And considering how many times it is mentioned, how many bills that have been brought forth to try and solve it, what problem are we actually solving? I would love there actually to be true data and facts laid out before a heavy conversation is done there. I don't mind that we have to, in fact, I support the fact that you should prove that you have the legal ability to vote. Yes, that's in our Constitution. But when they start taking it down and twisting words and making it harder and harder or easier and easier to challenge, just stop it. I don't know anybody that is living here illegally that is jumping up and down to go vote when you literally could be thrown in jail or back someplace.
When we
Who
can't
wants
even
to
get
do
the
that?
people who are registered to vote to go to the polls.
So that's the nonsense that I wish would stop. I don't mind addressing issues, but can we at least talk about real issues and not fictitious ones that are blown up?
And stop trying to disenfranchise people from their right to vote.
Right.
Amen. That's a big problem.
Agreed.
Final thoughts from you in about 30 seconds or so.
Wisconsin is ready to move forward. We just are. We're ready to acknowledge that neither side can always be right, that neither side can always be wrong. But I think most people in Wisconsin realize that we have been neglecting some things for too long in Wisconsin. And the things that we are neglecting are education, our child care, are focused on our kids. And I think everyone in Wisconsin believes that the kids are the most important thing. It's the most important thing in our house. We probably spend more money on our kids in our house as they're growing up than anything else. It isn't any different. We are a community family that must make sure the next generation has a great opportunity to succeed. We have to focus on that. We agree on so many more things than we disagree on. I would love to see the conversation stay there. Stay in those things that 80% of the people agree that we should be making progress on, and stop messing with the stuff that has almost zero valid conversation on the kitchen tables of most people. Deal with reality. Start working forward, but expect your people to get things done. Hold us accountable, because the lines are there now. Who's making the effort and who's standing on the edge? Who is challenging the system to be better and getting performance?
All right, great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks
and
for having
sharing
me.
your thoughts during the last hour. So many things we could have talked about, and there's just not enough time. So anyway, as I said in the outset, if you are registered to vote, please make sure that you do so. If you're not registered to vote, find out how. Contact your local clerk and get registered to vote. You can vote early, or you can vote on Tuesday, November 5th at the polls. That's going to do it for us. My thanks to Kristin Alfheim and to her staff for helping her be here tonight, and to my crew, and also to you. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.